She clinked her glass like it was a warning bell. "You disgust me from the day we met," she announced, her voice slicing through the air like a blade dipped in honey. The banquet hall, glittering with string lights and dressed in lilies, fell into silence. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some with pity, others with confusion. But I didn't flinch, not when she laughed, not when she declared I would be out of the house after the wedding. I just smiled. Because secrets, when nurtured long enough, grow teeth. And mine had been sharpening for months. The woman she thought was old and harmless? She didn't know I'd already rewritten my will, gathered recordings, and planned my exit with precision. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth. And when the projector flickered on, it wasn't just their voices echoing through the room. It was justice, wrapped in pearls, velvet, and silence. The silence after the funeral was a strange kind of heavy. Not the kind that weighed on your chest, but the kind that settled into walls, seeped into floorboards, and hung over dinner tables like cobwebs no one dared to clean. That silence lived with me for over a year after Charles passed. My husband of 36 years, he died holding my hand, quietly, gracefully, as if he knew I wasn't ready but trusted I would manage. And I did. I managed. At 62, I kept the house running. The lawn trimmed, the pantry stocked, the fireplace lit on cold evenings. I baked lemon pies for church potlucks, waved to neighbors, and kept a guest room made up even though no one ever stayed. I told myself I liked the quiet, that it was peace. But it wasn't. It was absence, wearing a mask. Then Nathan came back. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon, his voice strained and embarrassed. He'd lost his job at the logistics company, downsizing, he said, and just needed a place to regroup. I didn't hesitate. "The guest room's yours," I told him. "The house is yours. Everything is still yours." The first few weeks felt like a blessing, like the universe had returned my boy to me. We made pancakes on Sundays. He fixed the leaky kitchen tap Charles had meant to get around to. He even rewired the porch light. Each night we'd sit in the den, old westerns humming on the television, popcorn in a bowl between us, and I'd feel something almost like joy. Almost. Then came Jasmine. She arrived one brisk Saturday morning with oversized sunglasses and a coffee she never drank. Nathan introduced her like he was unveiling a prize. "Mom, this is Jasmine. Jasmine, my mom, Eleanor." She gave me a thin-lipped smile and a once-over glance that landed somewhere between polite disinterest and mild disdain. "It's so quaint here," she said, peering around the living room. Her eyes paused on the framed photographs along the mantel, Charles in his uniform, Nathan at his kindergarten recital, my mother shelling peas on the porch, and she added, "Like a little museum." I smiled, not too much. Just enough to be hospitable. Nathan laughed. "She means it's got character," he said, as if translating. But I understood her fluently. After that, Jasmine became a fixture. At first, weekend visits, then weekday dinners. She'd bring salads in plastic bowls, always too vinegary, and adjust the curtains without asking. She called my meatloaf comfort food, but not in a complimentary way. I caught her once running a finger across the baseboard in the hallway, inspecting for dust. Nathan began echoing her phrases. "We should modernize the space," he said one afternoon while flipping through a home design magazine. "Jasmine says neutral tones open the room." I blinked at the walls, painted buttercream yellow for cheer after Charles' diagnosis, and said nothing. Soon the kitchen became their space. They rearranged the pantry. Jasmine labeled the spice rack. Nathan moved the tea kettle. My tea kettle. Even his habits shifted. He stopped watching westerns with me, stopped asking about my day. He started shutting the door when he made phone calls, and when I'd ask, "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he'd answer with a distracted, "Yeah, just work stuff," even though he hadn't found a job. One evening, I set the table for 3. Roasted chicken. Potatoes the way Nathan liked them. Crisp outside, soft inside. Jasmine arrived late, air-kissed my cheek and said, "Oh, you made dinner. That's sweet." We already grabbed sushi, but I'll nibble." She nibbled at a single carrot. Nathan didn't touch his plate. He scrolled through his phone. I sat across from them, hands folded, watching the steam curl off the chicken. No one noticed when I cleared the dishes. No one offered to help. That night, as I folded napkins in the laundry room, I realized I hadn't heard my name all evening. Not Mom, not Eleanor. Just silence wrapped around the sounds of people living like I didn't exist. By the third month, Jasmine suggested they host a small get-together at the house. "Just a few friends," she said. "We'll bring everything, of course. You don't need to worry." She didn't ask, just announced it while flipping her hair and checking her reflection in the window glass. The night of the gathering, the house filled with unfamiliar laughter. People I'd never met leaned against my counters, drank wine beside my family portraits. Jasmine introduced herself as if she were already mistress of the home. "Nathan and I just adore this place," she gushed. "It's got potential, so much charm waiting to be unlocked." I stayed in my room most of the night, listened to the music thrum through the walls like a second heartbeat. When I did step out, just to grab a glass of water, a man in a navy sweater mistook me for the housekeeper. I didn't correct him, because in that moment, I wasn't sure he was wrong. There are two kinds of silence, the kind that heals and the kind that hollows. After Jasmine's party, the silence in my home felt like rot. Quiet, yes, but crawling. It settled into the grout between tiles, into the spaces where voices used to linger. I found myself drifting, moving from room to room with no real purpose, like a ghost rehearsing old routines. One morning, I found Nathan in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, pacing with urgency I hadn't seen in months. His voice was low, sharp around the edges. I paused in the hallway, just beyond the archway, and listened. "Yeah, but the title isn't in my name yet," he said. "We can't do anything until the transfer's official." My breath caught. A pause. "No, she hasn't noticed. She doesn't check the mail, just make sure the paperwork looks clean. I'll get her signature, one way or another." I stepped back, my heels sinking into the rug, pulse pounding. I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, that she wasn't me, but my name wasn't needed. My gut already knew the truth. That afternoon, Jasmine handed me a small gift-wrapped package. "Just a little something," she chirped. Her nails tapped the lid as I peeled it open. Inside was a slim book titled Living Light, a guide to downsizing for graceful aging. The cover showed a smiling woman folding towels in a room without photos or clutter, just empty space. "It's all about creating simplicity," Jasmine said. "You know, less burden, less stuff tying you down." I stared at the book, then at her. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Later that evening, I sat by the fireplace, the book untouched beside me. My fingers traced the spine, but my mind was elsewhere, years behind, in a hospital room humming with fluorescent light. Nathan was 9. Pneumonia had taken hold fast and the doctors weren't sure he'd make it through the night. Insurance wouldn't cover a private nurse. Charles had been gone 2 years by then, and every cent mattered. I remember walking into a pawn shop with my wedding ring wrapped in tissue. The man behind the counter didn't even flinch when he weighed it. I walked out with enough to buy the medications and a humidifier. That night, I sat by Nathan's bedside, holding his hand as he wheezed, whispering lullabies through cracked lips. I remember the fever breaking at dawn, how he opened his eyes and whispered, "You stayed." I remember thinking I'd do it again. Sell everything if it meant keeping him safe. Now he was selling me. The next day, while folding laundry, I found a small device wedged between the sofa cushions, a tiny voice recorder. My hands trembled as I pressed play. Static. Then voices. "Nathan, she's slowing down. I think she's starting to forget things." Another voice. "Jasmine's? Then this is the right time. You're doing the right thing." Click. I sat on the floor, laundry forgotten, the edges of the world blurred. It wasn't just about the house. It was about erasing me, painting me as incompetent, fragile, a liability. I didn't cry. Instead, I went to the hallway and pulled down the old photo album from the top shelf. It was heavy, the leather cover soft from decades of handling. I flipped through pages of birthdays, Christmas mornings, beach vacations, where Nathan's cheeks were still round with baby fat. I stopped at one photo, Nathan on his 10th birthday, grinning with a missing front tooth, holding a cake shaped like a fire truck. Charles had spent hours decorating it. I'd sewn the party hats myself. My hand hovered over the picture. Then I looked up at the mantel above the fireplace, now bare. Jasmine had removed the decorations last week, said they made the space feel dated. The frames were in a box in the attic. My family boxed and shelved like unwanted china. I carried the photo album to the kitchen and sat with it open on the table. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the walls in amber. I didn't weep. Not really. But as I stared at the pages, my lips began to tremble. Small, uncontrollable quivers that no one saw but me. My reflection in the window looked like a woman halfway between memory and mourning. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't my home anymore. Not because they had taken it, but because I had already given it. All of it. It started with a misdelivered envelope. I found it wedged between two catalogs in the mail stack. Nothing out of the ordinary. No red stamps or warnings, just an innocuous white envelope marked Property Evaluation. Final notice. The address was mine. But the name on the front was my own, written in a font I didn't recognize, as if someone else had typed my identity into a form and clicked Submit. I sat at the kitchen table, the kettle hissing behind me as I opened it. Inside were documents I had never seen before. Home appraisal reports, a financial statement outlining a $30,000 loan against the house, and a closing date marked for 3 weeks from now. At the bottom of the page was a signature. My name. But it wasn't mine. It was a close imitation, a forged echo of my handwriting, the loops too tight, the E too curved. My breath caught as I scanned the page again. This wasn't just a clerical error. Someone had used my name, my property, and my trust as tools in a silent betrayal. I flipped through the attached packet. Tucked between folded sheets was a single handwritten note. No envelope, no greeting, just a folded piece of stationery with pale blue lines and floral corners. Jasmine's handwriting. I recognized the long tails on her Ys, the girlish loops on every G. Nathan, it began. After the wedding, she has to go. There's no room for both a baby and baggage. You promised. Love, Jay. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, rereading the note until the edges blurred. She has to go. I thought of the book she gave me, the way she labeled it a gift, the recording in the couch cushion. Nathan's voice on the phone. A puzzle I had been too polite to piece together was now fully formed, and the picture it painted was monstrous. By the time the kettle screamed into silence, I had made my decision. The next morning, I dusted off my address book, the one I kept tucked behind the cookbooks in the pantry. The pages had yellowed with age, but Mr. Barnes' number was still there, written in Charles's neat block letters. When he picked up, his voice was rough with age, but steady. Barnes here. Henry, it's Eleanor Grant. A pause, then a warm, Ellie, it's been years. I need to speak with you, privately. I met him at his office above the hardware store downtown, the same place Charles and I signed our mortgage 3 decades ago. The chairs hadn't changed. Neither had the smell, lemon oil and old paper. I handed him the documents and sat quietly as he read, his brow furrowed deeper with every page. This is serious, he finally said, setting the folder down. Forgery, fraud. You could lose the house if this goes through. I don't want revenge, I said. I want protection. He leaned back, eyes softening. Then we need a plan. That afternoon, we drafted a new will. Nathan's name was removed. Everything, the house, savings, even my jewelry, was designated to the Marigold Shelter, a children's home Charles used to donate to every Christmas. It felt right. It felt clean. When I returned home, the house was empty. I moved quietly, deliberately. In the den, I opened the hollowed-out book I kept on the top shelf, a gift from Charles, once used to hide spare keys. Now it would serve a new purpose. Inside, I placed the first of the recording devices Mr. Barnes gave me. The next day, I installed another in the kitchen clock, a third beneath the hallway table. Each night, I checked the audio. Each morning, I labeled the files. At first, it was background noise, footsteps, TV chatter. Then, the gold started surfacing. Jasmine. She's been acting strange. Do you think she suspects? Nathan. Doesn't matter. I've got it under control. One signature and we're done. I played that one twice. Once for clarity, once for pain. By the end of the week, I had hours of evidence. Words whispered in rooms they thought were safe. Plans mapped out in cold tones. Discussions about furniture sales, liquidation, timelines. She won't fight, Jasmine had said once. She's too proud. She'll just leave quietly. They didn't know me at all. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. I traced the lines on my face, not with regret, but recognition. This was the face of a woman who had survived more than betrayal. This was the face of someone ready. A week after I'd started recording them, a small cardboard box appeared on the porch. There was no return address, just my name, Eleanor Grant, typed on a white label in clean, narrow font. It looked like something from an office supply store. I stood on the doormat for a full minute before picking it up, the weight of it unfamiliar, neither heavy nor light. Just waiting. Inside, nestled in brown paper, was a single USB drive. No note, no instructions, nothing but silence wrapped in plastic. I plugged it into my laptop, heart racing, and opened the single audio file it contained. Nathan's voice came through instantly. Clear, unmistakable. She's too soft. She's not going to stand in the way. Jasmine's too emotional to follow through, but I've got it handled. There was a pause, a chuckle. She thinks this is her idea, but trust me, Jazz wouldn't even know how to read a loan agreement without me walking her through it. Another voice responded, unfamiliar, male. And the mom? You sure she won't catch on? Nathan again. She won't. She still thinks I'm her baby boy. All I have to do is smile and she folds. That house is as good as ours. The audio clicked off. My lungs felt like they'd forgotten how to work. I stared at the laptop screen as if it might offer answers. The betrayal had already been bleeding out in small drops. But this was a rupture. I had been wrong. About Jasmine. About everything. I remembered the note in her handwriting, the book she gave me, the snide comments. Yes, she had played her part, but the mastermind? The architect of this quiet collapse? It was Nathan. My son. And somehow, that hurt more. That evening, I called Mr. Barnes and asked him to meet me the next morning. We sat in the same old office, but the air felt different now. Heavier. I need to know, I said. Everything you can find on Nathan. Discreetly. Mr. Barnes didn't flinch. He just nodded. I'll start with financial history and employment records. Give me a few days. He called back within 48 hours. You were right to ask, he said, his voice low. I pulled some archived academic records. In his senior year of college, Nathan submitted falsified tax documents to apply for additional grant money. The school flagged it but handled it internally. No expulsion, but a disciplinary note was added to his file. It never made it beyond the dean's office. I listened in stunned silence. He also had 2 credit cards maxed out within a year of graduation, Mr. Barnes continued, paid off with funds we now believe came from a personal loan, co-signed under your name. I sat down hard into the kitchen chair beside the phone. I didn't remember signing anything, but I remembered that year. The grief, the paperwork, the exhaustion of trying to keep it all together while still showing up for church, for friends, for Nathan. He must have slipped it in among the condolences, the sympathy cards, the medical bills. He'd used my love as camouflage. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed the audio from the USB again and again, each time peeling back another layer of the boy I thought I knew. And then I remembered something. Something Jasmine had said weeks earlier, during one of her more vulnerable moments. We were alone in the kitchen, she rinsing berries, me wiping down the counter. Out of nowhere, she had said, "You know, sometimes Nathan scares me." I'd dismissed it at the time, chalked it up to a lover's quarrel. But now those 6 words rang like an alarm I hadn't heard in time. The next weekend, they threw another party. This one was more intimate. Just close friends, a few bottles of wine, soft jazz playing from a wireless speaker. I stayed upstairs most of the evening, not out of fear, but observation. I wanted to see them from the shadows. Around 10, I stepped onto the landing. The staircase offered a perfect view of the living room below. Jasmine sat on the couch, drink in hand, legs tucked beneath her. She looked tired, not her usual composed, polished self. She was laughing at something one of her friends said, but the laughter didn't reach her shoulders. Nathan stood by the fireplace, holding court with 2 guests. His voice was louder than usual, his gestures more exaggerated. He looked like a man trying to prove something, trying to convince not just the room, but himself. Then something strange happened. As Jasmine rose to refill her glass, Nathan reached out and lightly touched her wrist. Not roughly, but firmly. Just enough that her eyes flicked to his, startled. There was a pause. She shook him off quickly, brushing past with an apologetic smile to the others. But I saw it. The tiny fracture. The fault line. Not between mother and future daughter-in-law, but between Jasmine and Nathan. The first crack in a mask I had taken too long to question. I turned away from the railing and returned to my room, closing the door behind me. My heart beat steady, my mind sharper than it had been in years. I had spent so long fearing Jasmine, but now I wasn't sure who I should fear more. The first thing to go was the bookshelf. It had been in the hallway since Nathan was 5, lined with paperbacks Charles collected over the years, mystery novels, gardening guides, a worn encyclopedia set from the 80s we never opened but never dared discard. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and found the shelf gone. In its place was a sleek console table with a marble top and 2 tall vases holding long, brittle stalks of something beige and sharp. "Modern," Nathan said when I asked. "Cleaner," Jasmine added, running a hand over the cold surface. They didn't ask, they just changed things. The next week, they painted the dining room. Covered the soft sage green, chosen by Charles himself, with a shade of white so bright it looked like hospital walls. Jasmine called it alabaster. Nathan said it made the room feel open. I stood in the doorway watching them roll over decades of memories with sterile strokes. A few days later, the sofa disappeared. The old floral one with the lumpy cushions we'd had since Nathan's teenage years. It had been the backdrop of every birthday, every snow day, every exhausted nap. They replaced it with a low-backed gray sectional and 2 throw pillows that cost more than my entire grocery budget for the week. They didn't stop there. Family photos came down, rugs were rolled up. My favorite lamp, the one with the blue stained glass shade, was accidentally broken during rearrangement. Even the smell of the house changed. My cinnamon potpourri was replaced by sleek plug-ins labeled Linen Breeze. I walked from room to room and saw myself vanishing. Not all at once, but piece by piece. It was a slow erasure. Deliberate, polite, final. One afternoon, I opened the hallway closet and found my knitting supplies pushed to the back, buried beneath boxes labeled Storage Jazz. In the kitchen, my recipe cards had been moved from the drawer beside the stove to the top cabinet, out of reach unless I stood on a chair. I didn't argue. I simply documented. Audio files time-stamped and labeled. Images stored discreetly. I recorded Nathan's dismissive sighs, Jasmine's passive-aggressive comments, the steady hum of manipulation disguised as progress. When Jasmine announced she'd invited a few coworkers over for a weekend mixer, I merely nodded. "Just a casual night in," she said. "Some snacks, drinks, nothing major." But when Saturday arrived, they brought in a catering service, hired a bartender, rented high-top tables, and moved all the living room furniture into the garage. I watched from the hallway as strangers wandered through my home, laughing and sipping cocktails. Someone leaned against the piano Charles once played every Sunday morning. Another woman flipped through my cookbook, scoffing at the handwritten notes in the margins. I stood still, invisible in plain sight. Jasmine floated from group to group, radiant and confident, hosting like it was her home. Nathan followed, smiling, laughing louder than usual, always with a drink in hand. No one introduced me. No one asked if I wanted to join. At one point, I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. A man turned and, startled, said, "Oh, are you the help?" I said nothing, just smiled faintly and left. Later that night, long after the last guest had gone and the hum of music faded, I heard voices in the kitchen. I stayed at the top of the stairs, just out of view. "She's always just there," Jasmine said. "Quiet, watching. It's creepy." "She won't be around much longer," Nathan replied, his voice low but confident. "Once the paperwork goes through, she'll be in assisted living by fall." "I just want to start our life," Jasmine whispered. "This doesn't feel like ours with her haunting every corner." There was a long silence. Then Nathan said, "She's in the way, but not for long." I slipped back into my room before I could hear more. The next morning, I made pancakes the way Nathan used to like them, crispy edges, extra syrup, and left them on the counter. He didn't touch them. He was too busy reordering the world around him, one stolen piece at a time. And I was learning how to disappear without making a sound. It was nearly midnight when I heard the arguing. I'd been lying awake, the ceiling fan casting slow, pulsing shadows across my bedroom wall. The walls were thin, and they hadn't bothered to whisper. Their voices filtered through the vents like a storm brewing behind closed doors. "I'm just saying," Jasmine hissed. "This is going too far." Nathan scoffed. "You said you wanted the house." "I wanted a future," she snapped. "Not to trick your mother into losing hers." There was a pause, sharp, loaded with breath. "She's old, Nathan, but she's still her." His voice was like a stone, cold, weightless. "She's not useful anymore," he said. "She just wanders, slows everything down. I need you focused on the baby, not babysitting my mother." The silence that followed felt thicker than any argument. My pulse ticked in my ears. "Baby?" I slid out of bed and crept to the stair landing, heart thudding. From where I stood, I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel the shift in the air. Jasmine's voice trembled. "You said we had time." "And we do," Nathan said. "But we don't need her in the way while we're building everything." "She's your mother." "No," he said flatly. "She's a burden." The words hit like a slap. I backed away, careful not to let the floor creak beneath my feet. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched in my lap. The confirmation of a pregnancy should have brought hope. Instead, it carried a timeline, a countdown. By morning, I tried to breathe like I hadn't heard it, move through my routines, toast, tea, a walk around the garden, but everything felt off, the wind too sharp, the silence too rehearsed. Around noon, Margot stopped by. She was one of the few constants in my world, older than me by a few years, with snow-white hair and a habit of always bringing lemon drops in her purse. She had a knack for knowing when something was wrong, even when I wore my best face. "I saw your Nathan online," she said casually, sipping the tea I poured. "He was at the coffee shop using one of their computers. I walked past and saw him browsing some shady sites." My eyebrows lifted. "What kind of sites?" She leaned in, voice dropping. "Assisted living directories. Not here, other states. You know what that means, right? Harder for friends to visit, less oversight." I felt something shift inside me. Not shock, not fear, something firmer, rooted, a decision beginning to bud beneath layers of grief. "Thank you, Margot," I said quietly. She nodded. "I don't like that boy's energy lately." Neither did I. That evening, I waited until they left for dinner. Nathan mentioned it offhandedly, some fancy place Jasmine craved, and I used the time to scan the kitchen for their notes. I wasn't sure what I hoped to find, but I needed to feel the truth in my hands. I found nothing. Until I noticed the missing light on the wall. The small security camera I'd installed weeks ago above the hallway was gone. Its usual red dot, blinking softly like a heartbeat, was no longer there. I climbed onto a chair, heart racing, and checked the base. The wires had been clipped clean, not yanked, not broken, purposefully removed. I didn't know when it had happened. I only knew it hadn't been me. 2 days later, I fell. It was in the stairwell, the one they never used, but I still did, leading from the laundry room up to the back hallway. I'd gone to retrieve a towel I'd forgotten in the dryer. My foot hit something, slick, round, and before I could catch myself, my body twisted, the world tipping sideways. Pain exploded through my shoulder. My head hit the wall. My knee buckled beneath me. I lay there for seconds, maybe minutes, blinking at the ceiling, waiting for sound, for help, for footsteps, but none came. Eventually, I pushed myself up, dizzy, aching, heart pounding with more than pain. At the base of the stairs was a bottle of furniture polish. I hadn't used it in weeks. It wasn't mine. I checked the camera again the next day, still gone. When I mentioned the fall to Nathan, he barely looked up from his phone. "Careful, Mom," he said. "You're not exactly 20 anymore." Jasmine looked startled. Her eyes darted to mine, almost guilty. I didn't speak. Not then. Because some truths are heavier when spoken too early, and I needed them to believe I was still broken, still blind, still playing the part of the woman slipping quietly into the shadows. They didn't know I had already stepped out of them. The bruises bloomed like violets along my arm, deep, aching patches that reminded me with every movement that the fall had been real. But pain, I'd learned, was an excellent teacher, and I had no intention of failing the lesson. I wore long sleeves for the next 2 weeks, shuffled my steps, let my hand linger on stair railings, let silences stretch a little longer before answering questions. I started repeating myself once or twice, not enough to seem incapable, just enough to suggest something softening around the edges of my mind. Jasmine watched me closely. Nathan didn't. He barely noticed when I switched the sugar and salt in the pantry, or when I placed the kettle in the refrigerator. Jasmine raised her eyebrows once, found the milk in the cupboard, but said nothing. Instead, she offered to help me with little things, tying my apron, reaching high shelves. It was the performance of a lifetime, one I rehearsed in silence. Every time I sat alone in my room, I organized flash drives by date. Every time I walked past the coat closet, I tapped the side where I'd hidden another recorder inside a hollow umbrella handle. I even placed one in an old tissue box in the guest bathroom. By the time my shoulder healed, I had nearly 8 hours of audio. Not all of it useful, but enough to build a mosaic. Conversations about downsizing the old woman, quotes from realtors about resale value, a voice note where Nathan laughed and said, "She'll probably think we're putting her in a resort." Mr. Barnes came by on a Tuesday afternoon. We met in my car, parked 3 blocks from the house, the windows rolled up, heat pressing in like a secret. "I've listened to the files," he said, holding a notepad. "There's enough here to file a fraud claim, possibly even elder abuse if it comes to that, but we'll need to present it cleanly, undeniably." I nodded. "You mentioned someone who could help with that." He glanced around, even though no one was watching. His name's Derek. He usually edits for depositions, sometimes criminal cases. Quiet, thorough, discreet. 2 days later, I met Derek in a borrowed office above a closed-down pharmacy. He looked young, early 30s maybe, but had the kind of calm that comes from seeing too much. He didn't ask questions when I handed over the recordings, just nodded and said, "I'll need a week." "Add photos," I told him. "Old ones, baby pictures, Charles, all of it." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. At home, I played my part to perfection. Burnt toast, misplaced keys, pausing mid-sentence like I'd forgotten the end. I even asked Jasmine the same question twice during breakfast. She looked alarmed, then strangely reassured. I was becoming exactly what they wanted me to be, a woman fading from the edges of her own life. But inside, I was sharper than I'd been in years. Every morning, I reviewed my list. Assets moved, accounts adjusted, my name resecured on the deed, Nathan's removed. Mr. Barnes had helped me file a formal claim against the forged documents, and the bank had launched a quiet investigation. Everything was aligning. One evening, I heard Nathan on the phone again, pacing the porch just outside the kitchen window. I stood in the dark, listening. "No, she hasn't noticed anything," he said. "Honestly, I think she's losing it. She asked me today what month it was." Pause. After the wedding, we'll bring in someone to help her pack. I don't want to deal with the guilt trip. Just make it smooth, quiet. It was always that word, quiet. They wanted me silent. They'd underestimated how dangerous silence could be. Later that week, Derek called. "It's done," he said, "and it's compelling. You sure you want it to end like this?" I closed my eyes, thought of the hallway stripped of color, the couch that wasn't mine, the scent of my life being replaced by theirs. "I'm sure," I whispered. When Nathan asked if I wanted to say a few words at the engagement dinner, I declined. "Maybe just a short video," I said, smiling gently, "for the memory books." He looked relieved, and that was how I knew it was working. The finished video wasn't just a compilation, it was a reckoning. Derek handed it to me in a black case no larger than a wallet. "It's cued to autoplay," he said. "First 3 minutes are childhood photos, soft piano. Then it shifts." "Good," I replied. "Make sure it plays clean, no lag, no skip." He nodded, but I didn't leave right away. I stared at the USB drive in my palm, feeling the weight of 100 decisions made in whispers. Then I pulled a second drive from my purse. "This," I said, sliding it across the table, "is an additional clip. Don't add it at the end. Put it in the middle, right before Nathan's bank statement." Derek plugged it in, headphones on, listening for just a minute. Then he looked up, eyes slightly wider. "Is that her?" I nodded. "Yes," caught on a recorder from the bedroom hallway. It was Jasmine's voice. Cracked, uncertain, barely above a whisper. Sometimes I wonder if I'm becoming the kind of woman I swore I'd never be. "Nathan?" He scares me when he talks about her like that. I didn't mean for this to go so far. The clip ended with a sigh and the sound of a door closing. I wasn't trying to vindicate her. I wasn't even sure if I pitied her. But the story needed to be whole. If truth was my weapon, it had to cut in every direction. 2 nights later, I caught Nathan in my room. It was subtle, the way his fingers trembled as he placed the folder back in my desk drawer, not quite where I'd left it. He didn't know I was awake, watching from the crack in the bathroom door. He didn't know the documents were decoys. Mr. Barnes and I had prepared a full set of false paperwork, loan forms, medical notes, even a revised will listing Nathan as my heir again. We planted them in plain sight. I needed to know how far he'd go, and now I did. The next morning, I made him eggs. He smiled as he ate, completely unaware that the version of me he saw, frail, distracted, forgiving, was vanishing. Jasmine arrived later that afternoon, alone. She lingered awkwardly at the kitchen counter, her hands shaking slightly as she picked at the corner of a napkin. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, gestured toward the sunroom. She sat, eyes darting to the corners of the room as if checking for surveillance. "I know you're planning something," she said finally, "and I don't blame you." I said nothing. I didn't want it to go this far. She swallowed hard. I found out I was pregnant and suddenly everything mattered more. The house, the money, the future. Still, I didn't speak. "I wanted to tell you," she continued, voice cracking. "I did. But Nathan, he said we had to stick to the plan, that you'd never let us live here unless we forced it." Tears slipped down her cheeks now. "I know you hate me, but please don't ruin the wedding. My parents are coming. There's so much tied to this. Just don't make it ugly." I looked at her for a long moment. Her makeup had smudged beneath her eyes. Her hands clutched the napkin like it was the only thing tethering her. I gave her what she came for. A nod. No words. Just a small, still nod. She exhaled in relief, misreading my silence for surrender. That evening, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the ghost they had tried to make. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't forgotten. Her lips moved slowly, and the words barely carried past her reflection. Sometimes, forgiveness is how you show someone they've become a monster. And sometimes silence is louder than revenge. The banquet hall shimmered with gold-trimmed linen and white lilies. Chandeliers dangled like glass teardrops above the polished floors. Every table was a portrait, crystal stemware, ivory plates, napkins folded into perfect swans. A string quartet played softly near the far window, the music just low enough not to compete with the hum of idle conversations. I sat at the head table in a dark green velvet dress, my hands folded neatly on my lap, pearl earrings catching the light each time I turned slightly. Around me, laughter rose and fell like waves, carefree, unaware. No one suspected, not the guests, not the servers, not even Jasmine, who floated between tables, accepting compliments and posing for photos with a champagne flute in hand. Her dress clung to her like a secret. White, too bridal for an engagement party, the fabric hugging her ambition like a second skin. Nathan stood near the bar, nodding, smiling, performing the part of the dutiful fiancé. He hadn't made eye contact with me all evening. At precisely 7:45, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to celebrate the engagement of Nathan Grant and Jasmine Cole. Before dinner is served, the bride-to-be would like to say a few words." A few polite claps, chairs shuffled, Jasmine stepped forward, glass raised, smile sharpened. "Thank you all," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. "Tonight means the world to us. Not just because of the future we're stepping into, but because of the people who've helped us get here." She glanced toward me, and I want to especially thank Eleanor, my future mother-in-law, for all she's done to support this transition. It's not easy stepping aside, letting go of the past, but she's done so with grace. A pause. Not every woman her age would be so self-aware. Laughter rippled through the room, uneven, unsure. "She's shown real courage," Jasmine added, making space for a new generation, a new legacy. I didn't flinch, just smiled faintly. The same smile I wore when she gave me that downsizing book, the same smile I wore when Nathan said I was slowing things down. Jasmine raised her glass. "Here's to fresh starts." A few more claps. The quartet resumed softly. I nodded to the MC. He returned the gesture and stepped forward again. "Before we continue with dinner, Eleanor has prepared a small video as a tribute to the couple. A surprise gift, if you will." The lights dimmed. The screen behind us glowed to life. Soft piano began to play. Photos of Nathan as a baby, his first steps, birthday candles, beach days with Charles lifting him on his shoulders. A collective murmur swept the crowd. Nostalgia, sentimentality. Then the music changed. The images faded into scans of legal documents, mortgage forms, property transfer requests, my signature copied, pasted, forged. The audio began, Nathan's voice. "She won't even notice, she doesn't check her mail." Gasp, another clip, Jasmine. "Once she's gone, we can sell most of it. Furniture, antiques. She won't be needing it at that place." Silence tightened. Then the unexpected. Jasmine's confession, recorded days before. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Nathan, he scares me when he talks about her like that." The screen went black. No applause. No music. Just the sound of forks abandoned mid-meal and a single sob caught somewhere near the back. I stood slowly, every eye now turned to me. "For 35 years, I said, my voice calm, measured, I was a wife, a mother, a woman who gave everything she had to the people she loved." I paused, let the quiet settle. "And tonight I am something else entirely. I am a woman who refuses to be erased." I held up a leather folder. "This," I said, "contains a revised will. As of last month, Nathan Grant is no longer my heir. Every asset, my home, my accounts, my estate, has been donated to the Riverton Children's Shelter." Gasps. A chair scraped loudly. Nathan's voice cracked. "Mom, can we talk about this?" "No," I said softly. "No more hallway whispers. No more pretending." I turned toward the crowd. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come not from strangers, but from the people we raised to know better. And with that, I stepped back into the shadows I had once inhabited, only this time, by choice. The projector hummed in the lingering silence, its final frame fading to black. For a long breath, no one moved, no one spoke. The air had shifted, thick with disbelief, shame, and something colder. Truth. Then quietly, another clip began. The screen lit up again, not with documents or recordings of betrayal, but with a living room bathed in afternoon light. Jasmine sat on a beige couch. Her face turned slightly away from the camera, clearly unaware she was being recorded. Her voice was softer, tentative. "I know what Nathan is doing," she said to an older couple, her parents by the looks of them. "I know it's wrong, but he says it's for us, for the baby." Her mother's voice was sharp. "It's still her house, Jasmine." "I tried to stop him," Jasmine replied, eyes glistening. "I told him she's kind, quiet. She doesn't deserve this, but he says she's holding us back, that she's a ghost in the living room." Her father looked grim. "You're marrying someone who talks about his own mother like that." The clip ended there. The room didn't know how to respond. Some guests shifted in their seats. A few exchanged glances. Jasmine sat frozen, hands clasped in her lap, cheeks blotched with red. She didn't look angry. She looked exposed. Nathan, however, exploded. "This is insane," he barked, leaping up from his chair. "You can't seriously believe this. That video, it's been edited. Jasmine, she's the one who wanted her gone." He pointed at her with a trembling hand. Jasmine's eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you—" "Nathan, you made the calls. You filled out the loan forms." He turned toward me. "Mom, please tell them. Tell them this isn't what it looks like. You've always known I had to take care of things. You said you trusted me." I didn't move. He went on. "You're just confused. You've been under a lot of stress. I mean, you fell down the stairs. Maybe you hit your head. Maybe—" My voice cut through his excuses like glass. "Do you want to hear what you said?" I asked. I reached into my purse and pulled out a smaller recorder, pressed play. Nathan's voice filled the room. "That house should have been mine from the beginning. She just sits in it like a statue, like it's her shrine. I'm done waiting." The sound of his own contempt echoed off the banquet walls. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in stunned, embarrassed silence. And then, unexpectedly, a voice from the crowd. "I got that on video," a young man near the back said, holding up his phone. "Sorry, I was recording the speech for my blog and I caught all of this." Someone whispered, "Isn't he from the Riverton Herald?" Whispers spiraled. Phones came out. Guests quietly slid their chairs back, eyeing exits as if escaping the shame might absolve them of having witnessed it. Nathan looked panicked. "You can't. This is a private event." But it was too late. The footage had left the room before he even sat down. Jasmine stood. Her face was pale, lips trembling, but she didn't argue, didn't run. Instead, she walked away from Nathan, past him, past the head table, straight toward the exit. Her heels clicked like a metronome, counting down the end of everything. And I stood. The room quieted again. I turned toward the guests, some red-eyed, others wide-eyed, a few pretending to look elsewhere. The same people who once looked through me now couldn't look away. I gave a small bow, not deep, not theatrical, just enough. Enough to acknowledge the truth laid bare, enough to mourn the loss that couldn't be spoken. Because I hadn't just exposed my son, I'd buried him, not in flesh but in memory. I turned back to the table, picked up my clutch, and walked away, my heels soft against the carpet, my shoulders straight. Behind me, the video screen blinked once more before turning off, and in my eyes, there were no tears. But if you look closely, you might have seen it. The quiet goodbye of a mother who had just said farewell to her only child. I left before sunrise. The moving truck came at 5, its engine low and patient, like someone who understood the weight of leaving behind not just a house, but a life. Everything I brought with me fit into 10 labeled boxes. No heirlooms, no faded photographs, just what I needed, and nothing I didn't. My new apartment was quiet and modest, a second-floor walk-up near the town library, where sunlight fell through the windows like it had been waiting just for me. The walls were blank, the air was clean, it smelled of fresh paint and eucalyptus from the soap I unpacked first. The first morning I made myself tea. No one interrupted. No one suggested changing the curtains. I drank it by the window, barefoot, watching a stray cat stretch in the alleyway below. Later that week, I walked into the local library and asked about the book club posted on the community board. The librarian, a soft-spoken woman named Gina, smiled like I'd just handed her good news. "We'd love to have you," she said. "We meet every Thursday." So I went. We sat in a circle, mostly women in their 50s and 60s, some with grandkids, some with poetry journals in their purses. The topic that day was the remains of the day. We talked about regrets and dignity and whether silence is a sign of strength or cowardice. I didn't speak much, but when I did, every head turned, not with pity, with attention. For the first time in years, I was being seen not as a burden, not as the background, but as someone worth hearing. One evening, a letter arrived. Cream envelope, careful handwriting. No return address, but I knew it instantly. There was a slight tilt in the N of Nathan, the way he always signed school permission slips. I held it for a long time before opening it. "Mom," it began, "I don't know where to begin." He talked about shame, about confusion, about regret. He wrote that he didn't understand how much of himself had been lost in the chase for security. He blamed stress, the baby, Jasmine, then quickly took it back, said it was all his, all on him. "I see now what I did," he wrote, "what I became, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to tell you, I'm sorry." The paper trembled in my hands. I read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer next to my spare light bulbs. I didn't respond. Forgiveness, I had decided, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing the shape of your future, and mine would no longer be carved by guilt. That weekend, I walked through an open-air market downtown. The scent of cinnamon and roasted almonds lingered in the breeze. I bought a new journal, a woven scarf, and a single sunflower from a boy with too many freckles and a grin too wide for his face. When I came home, I placed the flower in an old jam jar and set it by the window. No photos beside it, no memory attached. Just the bloom, bright, present, enough. I sat on the floor that evening, legs crossed, and opened my new journal to the first page. I didn't write about Nathan. I didn't write about Jasmine or the house or the dinner party. Instead, I wrote my name. Then below it, "Today, I chose me." And it was the beginning of something, not dramatic, not loud, but something honest, and finally, completely mine. The envelope was different this time. Softer, with uneven handwriting. There was no name on the front, but I recognized the hesitation in the curves, the way the ink had pressed too hard into the paper. Inside was a single page. "Eleanor," it began. It was from Jasmine. She wrote in short, careful lines. Said she was no longer with Nathan. That after everything unraveled, after the video, the fallout, the quiet that followed, she couldn't stay. "He's not the man I thought he was," she wrote. "Maybe he never was. Or maybe I changed too. I just know I couldn't raise a child in a house where truth was treated like an enemy." She'd left the baby with him, a son born 2 months early but healthy. His name was Charles. A nod, she admitted, to someone she barely knew but felt she owed something to. "I'm not proud of what I did," she wrote, "but I thought you should know. He exists, and he's part of you." The letter ended there. No signature, just space. I sat with the paper in my lap, the room unusually still around me. Then I stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down an old box I hadn't touched since the move. Inside were photos of Nathan as a baby, his first drawing, a lock of hair from his second haircut, tied with red thread, things I'd once saved for him, things I now realized belonged elsewhere. I gathered a few of them, carefully chosen. Nathan in the backyard wearing a towel as a cape, his first toothless smile. A photo of Charles holding him at the hospital, eyes wide with wonder. I added a small board book, one with animals and flaps, then one of my own favorite childhood book and Where the Wild Things Are, and a letter. "Dear Charles," I wrote, "you don't know me yet, but I knew your father when he was small, before the world made him forget how to be kind. If you ever need a place to feel safe, I'm here, always. I wrapped it all in brown paper and addressed it not to Nathan, but to Charles Grant, care of whoever loves him next. The post office clerk didn't ask questions, just weighed the package and smiled. A week later, Nathan showed up. He didn't call, didn't knock at first. I saw his reflection in the glass of the front door as I brewed tea. He stood there for a long while, hands in his pockets, body hunched. Not with the arrogance he once wore, but with something quieter, something heavier. When I opened the door, I didn't step aside to let him in. "Mom," he said. I didn't answer. "I got your package," he added. Well, Charles did, but I opened it. I nodded once, waiting. He shifted his weight. "I messed up. Worse than I even knew. I don't want to lose you completely." I looked at him then. Really looked. The lines on his face, the hollow behind his eyes. He was older, thinner, not just in body, but in soul. "I'm not your mother anymore," I said softly. That door closed. He flinched. "But," I continued, "I am the grandmother of a little boy who deserves to know what compassion looks like." His eyes filled, but I didn't reach for him, didn't offer comfort, because forgiveness, if ever given, must be earned without request. "Can I bring him by sometime?" he asked, voice cracking. "We'll see." He nodded slowly, stepped back down the stairs and disappeared around the corner. That evening I sat by the window. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden lines across the wall. One beam fell onto an old painting I'd hung weeks ago, an impressionist garden, once dull in color. Tonight it shimmered. I let the warmth rest on my face, and for the first time in years I smiled, not out of memory, not out of relief, but out of something new, a future perhaps. Not perfect, but finally mine.